Peppa Pig is a worldwide phenomenon that has won fans across the globe for over 20 years. And even with thousands of hours watched by fans, did you know that there are still mysteries the show doesn't want you to discover?
Oh.
There's a character who simply vanished without a trace. She's a young calf who should be part of Peppa Pig's circle, like Susie Sheep and Emily Elephant, but it seems that kids ignore her, and maybe that's why she ends up hidden away inside her house. Or was she sent away from town? We're talking about the daughter of Mrs. Cow and Mr. Bull. Everyone knows that Mr. Bull often stops by Madame Gazelle's school, even though he's never been known to have a child, but our sources suggest that he actually does. This mystery surrounds the character Claire Cow. Yes, that's her name. Claire shows up with Mrs. Cow a few times in the background of some episodes, but she never interacts with anyone. You might be thinking, but this little cow is Mrs. Cow's daughter, not Mr. Bull's. And here's where you're mistaken, because the same character appears next to Mr. Bull in another episode. If they aren't family, that would be rather strange because children don't typically wander around with adults they don't know. Plus, Mrs. Cow marries Mr. Bull in Peppa's latest movie, Cinematic Celebration, probably because they were already a couple and just decided to make it official. But whether or not Claire is his daughter isn't the biggest mystery, it's where she went. The little calf simply vanished. She doesn't appear in other episodes and she never plays with Peppa's group. Claire wasn't even present at her mother's wedding, and she didn't go dress shopping with her. How can a child just disappear like that? Look at the wedding scene. She's not there. It's such an important event, so where did she go? The show doesn't want you to find the answer to that question, but we just hope Claire didn't run into Mr. Wolf out there. We know this mystery has piqued your interest. This and many other puzzles will be revealed next, so get your popcorn ready and join us for another Cinewave. Another mystery involving a different marriage is the sad possibility that Mrs. Cat may actually be an unfaithful wife. It's odd to think a show like Peppa Pig would tackle this kind of story, but there's evidence suggesting the show's creators might be hinting at Mrs. Cat's infidelity. The biggest clue is in this scene we're about to show. Didn't see anything strange happening? Let's break it down. In the episode Grandpa Pig's Birthday, Peppa's family goes to celebrate at a restaurant specifically meant for couples. Notice the well-set tables, the fancy glassware. It's a romantic and family-friendly spot. And you saw Mrs. Cat there, right? It wouldn't be odd for her to be dining with her husband in a place like this, if the gentleman sitting next to her were indeed her husband. But there's a chance he might not be. Hold on, let us explain further. The real Mr. Cat is this character here. Can you spot the difference? The friend sitting with Mrs. Cat has a different fur color, which is why many fans believe we're looking at an entirely different character. Of course, this could just be an animation error, but this kind of slip-up seems to happen quite often. Maybe Mr. Cat should have a chat with his wife. Staying on the topic of couples, there's a mystery that might only be answered in a series where Peppa is already an adult. Can animals of different species have children? Initially, the answer would be no, as that's not possible in the real world. But Peppa hints that in her world, maybe such things can happen. In the episode titled The Future, Peppa Pig and Susie Sheep say they want to marry Pedro Pony and Danny Dog, and even have kids. But how would that be possible? We're talking about 4 different species: pig, sheep, pony, and dog. Now, a couple doesn't necessarily need to have kids to be together, but Peppa insists she's going to marry Pedro and have children with him. So the only conclusion is that species isn't an issue here. Will we ever find out? As we mentioned, Mr. Bull probably does have a daughter, or at least a stepdaughter, though she never shows up for Madame Gazelle's classes. In fact, Mr. Bull himself is the character who appears in the school setting the most, despite not being a student. He fixes all the damages that need repairing, which makes us wonder if Madame Gazelle's school building even has a janitor. It's common for a school to have this professional on hand to help out. A place with children should have solid maintenance. But there's more to it. Where's the school's principal, the school's inspector, the other classes? Madame Gazelle seems to be the only adult character, aside from Mr. Bull, who works there. We might think it's a low-income school, but that also doesn't seem likely, as the children clearly come from well-off families. Daddy Pig has a great job as an architect. The Rabbit family is probably wealthy given Mrs. Rabbit's planes and shops and Grandpa Rabbit's space rocket. And it's very strange and mysterious that George studies in the same class as Peppa. We could understand Edmund, who's a science genius, skipping grades, but not George. And were you or are you a good student at your school? Comment with #brain so we can get to know ya. Have you ever noticed that all the houses and shops are on hills? Why is that? It's pretty suspicious that the entire town is built on steep hillsides with no other homes nearby. Peppa and her family practically have no neighbors, making everything seem very far apart, giving the impression they live in a rural town. Even so, it's an odd place to build a home. In the episode The Biggest Muddy Puddle in the World, we learn that houses on higher ground are protected from floods, but that doesn't happen often enough to justify it. Why would the show's creators place them in such a risky location? The zoo is a prison. When Madame Gazelle takes the kids to see the animals, she's shocked to see Mr. Lion and frantically says he's escaped. Super suspicious. She clearly expected Mr. Lion to be a prisoner there, which means not only wild animals are kept in the zoo. So why would Madame Gazelle take young children to a place like that? Are there frequent prison breaks? Maybe the prisoners should take a few lessons from Tiddles the tortoise, who's always escaping from Dr. Hamster. This is definitely one of Peppa Pig's biggest mysteries. Why would a tortoise want to escape from a place meant to care for him? Tiddles constantly sneaks away to climb trees, an unsolved mystery even after 300 episodes. Is Dr. Hamster a bad caregiver? Or maybe Tiddles has something hidden up in those trees? Even though it's a kids show, one question has many fans deeply curious. Who is the narrator of the episodes? You might not have noticed, but the narrator doesn't seem like a regular person telling a story, and he never interacts with the characters. He only speaks sometimes, and it's usually just to state the obvious. Do the characters in Peppa's world even know he exists? Peppa's narrator may not interact with her, but we here do, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive notifications. One of the biggest mysteries in the show revolves around Susie Sheep's dad, who has never appeared in any episode. We can imagine that he may no longer be alive or that Susie's mom is no longer married to him. Still, it's suspicious that Susie has no contact with her dad and he's never even mentioned in the episodes. Once, Mommy Sheep mentioned that Granny Sheep would be moving in with them, and Susie asked if that meant 3 people would be living in the house, indicating that Susie's dad does not live with his daughter. In the Valentine's Day episode, something very suspicious happens. On this holiday, couples exchange love notes with their partners. Daddy Pig, being quite romantic, gives Mummy Pig a card, but when Daddy Pig asks where his card is, do you know what Peppa and George's mom says? She replies that she gave it to Mr. Zebra. Daddy Pig finds this very odd, and Mummy Pig quickly clarifies that Mr. Zebra, the postman, will bring it to their house. Okay, it's a little better to know the card is coming in the mail, but why would Mummy Pig need to mail a card to her own home? Wouldn't it have been easier just to write a love note and hand it to her husband who lives right there with her? Very strange, Mummy Pig. Everyone watching Peppa Pig has a good laugh, but there's something very mysterious in the show. Every character throws themselves to the ground when they laugh, even in moments when they probably shouldn't. One example is Mr. Bull, who had a broken leg, but he still threw himself on the floor to laugh along with Santa and the others. Could it be that they experience some sort of brain jolt whenever they find something funny? We all know that Miss Rabbit has tons of jobs and businesses, and how she manages to juggle all of them is a big mystery. But that's not our question here. What we really want to know is, why does Miss Rabbit hold down so many jobs? Let's assume she doesn't have superpowers that allow her to be in several places at once, which is a normal assumption. But even so, there's no clear reason for her to take on so many roles, unless she's a gangsta. I know this might come as a shock to you, but let me explain using her shoe shop as an example. If you take a close look at the shop, you'll see lots of types of shoes that no one ever buys because all the characters wear the same style. So there's really no reason to keep a shoe shop like that unless Miss Rabbit's money has an unusual origin and all her jobs are actually a front to mislead the authorities. We may never find the answers to most of these questions, but that doesn't mean we can't keep enjoying Peppa. We've lined up 2 more videos for you to watch. See you in the next video!